Welcome to TESOL's second annual Black History Month webinar. I'll ask that you, everyone else, please mute yourselves until the presentation is over. When we get to the question time, then you can unmute yourself to ask questions. There will be an opportunity to ask at the end of the presentation. Ask as many questions as you can. So I bring greetings from the entire board of directors of TESOL. I also wish to recognize and thank TESOL's Black English Language Professionals and Friends, Professional Learning Network. My name is Okon Effiong from Nigeria. I'm currently teaching at Qatar University. I'm the immediate past president of Africa ELTA and current TESOL board member. I will be your moderator for today's webinar. Each panelist will present for 30 minutes. At the conclusion of the three presentations, you'll have the opportunity to ask questions from the panelists. You can post your questions in the chat, send them directly to me during the presentations, or raise your hand to ask a question at the appropriate time. So our first presenter is my countrywoman, as we say in Nigeria, my countryman, Oluyemisi Adedokun Oladejo. Ms. Adedokun Oladejo holds a master's degree in English from the University of Ibadan. For 13 years, she has taught English language across public secondary schools in Nigeria. She has several book titles to her name, including Premium English Grammar, a comprehensive grammar guide for learners and teachers of English. Oluyemisi is the winner of the 2020 African Writers Prize for Creative Nonfiction and a co-winner of the 2021 Ogun State Academic Laurel. Oluyemisi regularly shares English tips and tips for success in IELTS on her social media handles. In addition, Ms. Adedokun Oladejo is the 2022 TOEFL Prize winner, the first Nigerian and African to win the TOEFL English Practitioners Prize. Ms. Adedokun Oladejo, we are looking forward to hearing from you. Welcome. You may share your screen.
Right. Good evening, everyone. I want to be sure that I can be seen. Can you see me?
Yes, we can see you.
Beautiful. I'm going to start sharing my screen as I try to, let's see, I try to introduce myself and this is not what I'm trying to look for. This is not it. Okay. Here. It's not showing. Yes. I believe that you can see my screen now.
Very clear.
Can you see my screen? Can you?
Yes, we can see. Can you do full screen? F5.
Yeah, I'm going to do that. Each time I try to give you a full screen, something goes wrong.
Let's work with what we have. Go ahead. I think we can just move it as it is.
Okay, so I'm just going to introduce myself formally. My name is Oluyemisi Adedokun Oladejo. I attended the University of Ibadan in Taishilabi University of Education in Nigeria. I'm also a writer. Apart from being a teacher of English language, I write fictions and non-fictions. This is what I look like. I have some of my publications here. I have Premium English Grammar. I was able to publish on Amazon in January 2021. I have a work of fiction titled Angels Don't Always Come with Wings. Then I have Omidon. Omidon means the maiden, and that's my debut novel. Then I have a story I recently published for children. I actually wrote this book so that for the first time my daughter will be able to say that she has read something written by her mom. Because my daughter will go around and tell everyone that her mom is a writer, but she really doesn't understand what I write. I decided to write this book so that she could relate with my writing. So I was winner of the 2020 African Writers Prize. In the year 2021, I was recognized by the government of the state Nigeria as one of the teachers with exemplary service. And just recently, I won the 2022 TOEFL English Practitioners Prize. I'm going to be explaining to you what is involved, the mandate that comes with this prize and what it involves. Yes, as a teacher of English language in Ogun State, Nigeria, I've had the privilege of teaching English language across public secondary schools. And presently, I serve in a low-income community secondary school. So this is my present school. As you can see in this picture, you see, from this picture, you can tell that this is a low-income community secondary school. So this is where I work presently, and I have the privilege of using technology to teach my students as being sponsored by Education Testing Service in USA. So as a teacher of English as a second language in Nigerian public secondary schools, what challenges do I encounter? What are the difficulties? In my 13 years of teaching English in Nigerian secondary schools, I've encountered a number of difficulties, but the first one here is the foregrounding of the mother tongue, which somehow relegates English language to the background. I believe that my brother from Nigeria here can tell you that well-to-do parents do not send their children to public secondary schools in Nigeria. If you see secondary school students that are attending public schools, their parents are either middle class or the poor ones. I wouldn't say very poor, but the poor ones. So the category of students I teach are children whose parents are not educated. They are children who speak Yoruba language. Yoruba language is the prevailing language in my part of Nigeria. So all day, these children speak Yoruba, and the only exposure they have to English language is in the school. And most of the time, they don't get to speak English except the teacher is watching, except the teacher is in the classroom, because they are from the same community and they have the same mother tongue. They speak Yoruba in and outside the school. So that has somehow relegated English language to the background. And as a teacher of English language, I find myself constantly enforcing it, constantly encouraging them to speak. Sometimes these children don't want to speak because they believe that they are poor, and if they make mistakes, they will be laughed at. Just have to keep on encouraging myself to forge ahead. So what I do in the classroom does not have any form of consolidation. There is no follow-up when they get home because their parents will speak Yoruba to them at home. Their friends at home will speak Yoruba to them. So it's really challenging. So I find myself struggling with students who prefer to speak in their mother tongue than to speak in English language. So that is one of the challenges that I encounter as a teacher of English to speakers of other language in Nigeria. I'm trying to. Yes. Okay. There is the challenge of inaccessibility of resources. Public secondary schools in Nigeria are poorly funded for reasons I'm not allowed to say here. So our schools are poorly funded, and as a result, we do not have access to the resources we would really love to use. An average public secondary school in Nigeria does not have a library. Yes, an average public secondary school does not have a library. Yes. So we don't have good textbooks to teach these children. Sometimes it's difficult for the teacher to lay her hands on the textbook she needs to teach the children. Sometimes the textbook you are able to lay your hands on in your local bookshop lacks substance. And then if you're able to stumble on a textbook that has what you're looking for, the school cannot afford it most of the time. For example, the policy that the government of Ogun State operates as of today is the policy of free education. So many of the students in my school are in school because education is free. If they are asked to make payments, they can't afford. And because we are operating a policy of free education, the government has no resources to meet all our demands. So we really don't have good books. Yes, I recall that when I made the decision to write premium English grammar, that decision was sponsored by my inability to access a good textbook of grammar. Yes, every now and then I would get a textbook that has one topic and it doesn't have the other. I will get another textbook that has one topic and it doesn't have the other. So it was like that for a long time. I didn't think I was going to write a textbook. I prefer to write fictions. All my life I've written fictions. So I didn't see myself writing anything non-fiction, not to talk of writing a textbook. But then I recall Toni Morrison saying that if there is a book you like to read, but it hasn't been written, then you must write it. I wouldn't say that the textbook I would like to use in my class has not been written. I would only say that I couldn't access the textbook. So I took it upon myself to write premium English grammar. It took me several months. And I'm going to tell you that it wasn't a smooth ride. It wasn't a smooth ride. But at the end, I was able to publish this book. Today, premium English grammar is available on Amazon. But more importantly, it's available to teachers of English in my community. I'm happy when I see teachers of English telling me that my textbook has been so useful to them and to their students, and they found a lot of value in it. You know, there is this joy that fills my heart that this textbook is useful for me, but more importantly, it's useful for other teachers of English that might be encountering the problem I was encountering before I wrote the textbook. So inaccessibility of resources is one of the challenges I have as a teacher of English to speakers of other languages in Nigeria. Then we have overpopulation and congested classrooms. I love to say it again that my case is peculiar. It's peculiar in the sense that I teach in a public secondary school. As of today, I teach in a public secondary school, and my school is overpopulated. Yes, in 2021, I assumed duty as a teacher of English in Itolu Community High School, my present school. It was last year that I resumed in this school. And when I got to the school, I realized that I was going to teach about 2,000 students as the only English teacher in the school. Well, I didn't know how I was going to cope. I didn't know how I could be productive. How on earth would I teach 2,000 students And I realized that until my transfer to that school, the school had been without a teacher of English for several months. So for several months, these students were not taking English language. Okay, so on the average now, I teach 18 classes. Yes, I teach 18 classes. And each of these classes has over 100 students. Now, because our classrooms are congested and overpopulated, the effectiveness is not there sometimes. You're teaching here, some students are making noise at the back, they are engaged in other activities, and because the class is congested and crowded, there is no way for you to get to the back to call that child to order. That's number one. Number two, in the space of 40 minutes, I'm expected to teach English language to a class of more than 100 students. I want to explain, I want to give notes, I want to give room for questions and answers. I want my students to interact. And I want to do all of this in the space of 40 minutes. I'm doing this in the space of 40 minutes and I have over 100 students. I want to tell you that it has been quite challenging for me. For example, between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. that I'm in school, I work non-stop. Sometimes I get home and if you want to mark, you want to grade, you want to review, you want to give feedback and recommendations, it's really challenging. So those are the three challenges I can name for now. So what are the ways by which I've been navigating these challenges? Number one, I don't depend on textbooks only. I also use online resources. Yes, I mentioned that resources are not always accessible. Then the situation is worsened by the fact that many of the students won't even buy the textbooks. Even when the textbooks are available, their parents cannot afford to buy the textbooks for them. And because the government is giving them education free of charge, the government will not buy textbooks for them. It's up to the parents to purchase the textbooks and other things that the students will need. But because their parents are not educated,
I think we've momentarily lost Yemisi there.
And they are poor, they can't afford 100 students or more. Hello? Hello?
Yes, we can. We have you. Yeah, go ahead. Yemisi, we lost you for a few seconds. Go ahead.
Okay. So I said that many of these students don't have the textbooks. Even when the textbooks are available for purchase, their parents can't afford them. So in a class of over 100 students, only 2 students have textbooks. So most of the time I go online. I use resources that are available online, resources that I can access myself, and sometimes it might involve my transcribing the resources. I do that, I transcribe the resources for them since they don't have textbooks. So I don't use only textbooks, I use online resources. I have access to PDF Drive. I have access to other websites where I can get textbooks, PDF that I can use. And then sometimes I have to write lengthy notes on the board since they don't have textbooks. Sometimes when I want to teach reading comprehension, I might need to write a full passage on the chalkboard. It's a public secondary school, so we don't even have white marker board. We use blackboard and white chalk. So sometimes I might have to write a whole passage on the board. It's really draining, but I find myself doing it. And then there are times I allow my students to borrow textbooks from other classes. For example, if I have a class in JS2A and only 2 or 3 people have the textbook required, I might allow some of them to go to JS2B or JS2C to borrow textbooks from their friends. And then sometimes I ask my students to make photocopies. If I know that on the next lesson, we are going to be using the 79th page of Macmillan Brilliant Grammar, Macmillan Brilliant English textbook, I might just tell them to make a photocopy of that page. That isn't going to cost much. They can afford that. They might just use the stipend they have to make the photocopy. And then we use the page and we move on. And then I have a relief now that I am being sponsored to embark on a project by ETS. I now have access to the English Learning Center. My students and I now have access to English Learning Center, and I want to tell you that we have a lot of things to gain from the ELC. From the ELC, we have a lot of things to gain. We have resources there, pictures, text, and interactive sessions and games that can help my students. So for now, Education Testing Service in USA is assisting me to facilitate the teaching of English language with computer-assisted language learning resources. So just this week, the resources arrived, the computers, the projectors, the speakers, the microphone, and every other thing we are going to need has been supplied by Education Testing Service, and I am immensely grateful to ETS. So starting from next week, I'm going to be using technology in my classroom. I am really excited about this. And I know that it's going to be a positive turnaround for my students. I believe that it's going to make my students better versions of themselves. I really do. And so let me just tell you about my TOEFL prize. How did I win this prize? Okay, in April last year, I enrolled for a course at Bridge Universe. It was a paid course. I paid about 30,000 Naira. I can't even remember how much I paid. So I took a paid course at Bridge Universe. Thereafter, I was signed up for their newsletter. So every now and then I would get a mail from Bridge Universe. Sometimes I will read, sometimes I will discard. And then on this fateful day, I got a mail and I opened, they were talking about the TOEFL prize. I clicked through. When I got to the website, I found that it was an opportunity for me to get what I have been looking for, because I have been looking for reinforcement since I started teaching in my present school. As the only teacher of English language to over 2,000 students, I have been looking for something that could increase my productivity. So I clicked through, I found that I needed to apply. The application process was tedious. It took days, and I was finally able to submit my application just a few hours before the deadline. And along with the application, I submitted my resume. Weeks later, I got a mail from ETS that I had been shortlisted for a Zoom interview. So I was interviewed on Zoom. I knew that I really did well. I knew that I impressed the people, but then I had my fear because I knew that no African had won this prize in the past. But I knew that it would change a lot of things about my classroom if I could win the prize. I talked to my sister about it. After the interview, I talked to my sister. I told her about my concern because I found that no African had won the prize. And she said something. She said, "Yeah, me see, be the change you are looking for. If no African had won this prize before, it can start with you. Be the change you are looking for." So weeks later, I got a congratulatory mail that I had won the prize. It's the first time that an African would win the prize. I want to tell you that it was indeed a watershed moment for me because I was excited. Next, I had a renewed hope in my Black blood. I had a renewed hope in my Black skin. I saw the strength in my Black blood. And then it reminded me of this saying by Martin Luther King: "I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the contents of their character." So I want to say that I am immensely grateful to ETS for assessing my intellectual capacity rather than assessing the tone of my skin. So for that, I am really grateful. And I think I have come to the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Yemisi.
Thank you.
Yeah, good presentation. I remember a commercial, a TV commercial back in the 70s when it's this black thing good, Guinness beer, black thing good. So yes. When you said you had confidence in your blackness, your Black blood, I remember that commercial. Thank you very much. So next we'll hear from Daphne Germain. Ms. Germain is a Black immigrant born in Haiti and raised in the US with various levels of fluency in 6 languages, 6 different languages. She's a graduate of Boston University's Questrom School of Business and has pursued a degree in education, urban ministry at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary. Her experiences include youth education, community organizing, project management, and program development through various organizations in our community. Ms. Germain most recently served as the interim assistant superintendent of the Office of English Learners before transitioning to a new role within BPS. Ms. Germain, please proceed. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Okan, and thank you, everyone. Olumisi, I am floored to follow you. Listening to not only your accomplishments, but the challenge that is in front of you to teach a group of students, 100 students per course. My prayers and my heart goes to you as you inspire and lead a new generation. I am utterly grateful to be part of today's conference. I'll be sharing my screen to begin my presentation. I am also grateful to Dr. Ayanna Cooper for the opportunity she's provided me to have this platform to be able to share a little bit of my story. As Okan identified, I currently work in the Boston Public Schools. I've transitioned out of my role as the interim assistant superintendent. I am now leading a project work for the district around more program development, not just for English learners, but across the district in terms of schools, rebuilding schools, rethinking education, and I'm very grateful for it. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you my story around the work of Black bilinguals and supporting Black bilinguals in regards to the Haitian community of which I am a member. My story starts really in the 80s. My parents emigrated to the United States from Haiti. And my father came back to get me and my brother right in the midst of the 1986, 85, 86 Duvalier coup d'etat. And I still remember very vividly growing the day of the coup, how the televisions were off. I love to watch Scooby-Doo in the morning, and I couldn't because they were playing the national anthem, and after that, you heard the emergency. And that's something that forever sticks in my mind, of the students that we are teaching, the communities that we are interacting with, and some of the traumas and the concerns that till this day we're still dealing with as humanity. When my parents came to the US, they enrolled me in the Boston Public Schools. At that time, it had a bilingual program focused for Haitian students. Our teachers were members of our community who also connected to us. I remember my first and second grade teacher attended our church. And so for parent conference meetings, my parents didn't necessarily have to come to the school. They just went to church where they got all their updates of how my brother and I were doing in school. Growing up within this enclave of a homogeneous community, though I went to school where we spoke English, everything else about my upbringing growing up in the US was that it was surrounded by that community. So we went to church, events and activities, making friends, all of that was centered around our community. And the beauty and the power of my community was that we were already multilingual, speaking French, Haitian Creole. Because of the borderline with the Dominican Republic, many of our educated members, and many of them were professionals coming in from Haiti as teachers, engineers, doctors, etc., also were fluent in Spanish while learning English. Growing up, I had the privilege of leveraging my language and my cultural background. From my community, I drew a lot of strength. One, the commitment to education, commitment to service and servanthood in our community, knowing that as I am being trained, my father himself is a pastor, that our responsibility is always for the uplifting of those around us. And so for me, though I had the opportunity to be educated in America, the heart that my parents gave me was always of service. So wherever I went after I graduated Boston University, I had several corporate jobs and opportunities before I entered into the Boston Public Schools. But at every level, I knew that giving back to my community in some shape, way, or form was part of what it is that I was raised to do. And so while working in the Boston Public Schools, organizing within the community, we ended up opening up first in the nation, first in the US, a Haitian dual language program, of which I will be talking a little bit about in my presentation with you today. The story of the Haitian community in Boston is a very typical story of an immigrant group. There are three big waves of migration of Haitians in the greater Boston community. During the Duvalier regime, we lost a lot of our professionals, what many communities will identify as the brain drain. Fearing oppression, those who were educated and speaking out against the government, many of them left in the 50s and the 60s and emigrated to the US. And many of them were, again, highly educated. So they entered in, they were already professionals. Their children were able to integrate into the educational system, getting access to private education. And so they didn't really suffer the typical stories of what we hear of immigrant children learning English in the US. Then during the 80s also, we had a second wave of migration of which I was part. Again, this during the coup d'etat, where you have more of your middle class individuals leaving. And this is where also in our greater Boston community, we start seeing the parents organizing and demanding of the system to provide better education for their children. Then in the 90s, we had our third wave of immigrants who left Haiti. And what we identified within that community group is that that community had a lot of interrupted education. So they were children of those who were of lower class within the Haitian community. who did not have stable education, as Oluyemisi identified, lack of resources, lack of educators, trained educators, overcrowdedness, inconsistency in terms of their timeline within the educational setting. So even then, the need for advocacy increased in the mid-90s in the greater Boston area. And so indeed, we had parents and community organizations who were organizing. I think someone needs to mute. Thank you. Who are organizing. But what happens in a lot of our immigrant stories is that the parent or a leader who is organizing and giving charge within our communities, many of them are also working, also have other responsibilities, and they themselves migrate, meaning they may start living out in Boston, but find themselves moving to Florida or moving to Atlanta. And so we've had changes and movements, and it impacted the strength of their advocacy within the programs. Boston responded very well. During the 80s, it had really strong bilingual programs for students in BPS. But over time, as parents disengaged, community leaders weren't holding the system accountable, what you find was that leadership changes, the leader of the district changes, the leaders of schools, principals change, and the quality of the program varies from school to school. And over time, we went from a place of having very robust programs, like 10, 11 programs, to now we're down to about 2 or 3 programs across the district. In 2015, there was a situation that occurred where, again, our parents identified there is a need for us to re-engage the system. And we had a situation at a particular school, at a high school, where students who were coming from international backgrounds were being asked to repeat courses, though they had demonstrated that they had the subject matter expertise, meaning they had the knowledge of the math or the science, though they lacked English fluency. And that is, the work of a school district. Teach them English, but you don't necessarily have to hold the student back if they're demonstrating knowledge and competence in their math and their science skill sets. And so parents begin to organize, and this wasn't just Haitian parents. We had our Hispanic parents, our Latino parents, Arabic community, Somali community were organizing. But we took advantage of that within the Haitian community, and we launched at a state level a parents association. And then this association, not only did we kind of push back against the district, but we built up on that momentum to give birth to this Haitian dual language program. Haitian students right now are the 3rd largest student, immigrant, or language body within the Boston Public Schools and also in the state of Massachusetts, behind our Hispanic students. And right now we have our Cape Verdean students, also our large Black bilingual community. We are still continuing to work and advocate, but knowing that there are also parents who, when they register their children, may not necessarily register them as Haitian descent, or speaking Haitian Creole, because of some of the various variety there is within our community. Some of our parents will just register their children as Black, or they'll actually register their children as Hispanic, depending on where it is that they're emigrating from. In building out the Haitian dual language program, our story really is about the power of a community. As we're advocating for our students to get access to quality English instruction from our teachers, we also want them to support our students in terms of native language. In Massachusetts, a law was passed back in 2018, where it actually allows for districts to leverage the power of native language instruction. And our community really took advantage of that. And what you're looking at is a picture of members of our community. here we have Dr. Michelle DeGraff from MIT, who is a visionary leader around the power of the native language and Creole instruction, and not just in terms of Haitian Creole, but the power of how other countries, community groups, based on the impacts of colonialism, have developed a new language for themselves, and that language has value. And he was a key figure for us in the work that we were doing, and the empowering of our leaders in our community to embrace even having native language instruction in Haitian Creole in the Boston Public Schools. This event was put together in partnership with our teachers union. Many of the individuals here are teachers in our Haitian dual language program, Ms. Bordeaux, as well as our parent leaders. Mrs. Marie right here is one of our key parent leader and advocates, as well as many members of our community who came together. In this PowerPoint also, I'm showing all of the different organizations that we had to tap into in order to bring about this program. As MSC identified, and accessibility to resources was one of the key obstacles that hindered how services and supports were being provided to our community. Those who did not have knowledge, background, or experience with our culture and in the Haitian community, their biggest complaint was there was nothing, that there were no resources, there were no books, no children's books, to be able to create a curriculum to be able to do Haitian Creole instruction in the Boston Public Schools. And what we literally had to do was build it from the ground up, of connecting with all of our various community groups. Educa Vision is a publisher out of Florida that has over the years built a platform where they promote Haitian authors who are writing in French, Spanish, Creole, English, and working in partnership with them to be able to develop and create the resources necessary to build up the programmings. Connecting with other leaders across our community to kind of continue to drive the power of language, that when our children are able to speak confidently their native language, there's a lot of benefits. There's a lot of benefits that they're able to connect to, being able to talk to your grandparents and hear the stories of your culture firsthand in your native language, and understanding what your grandparents are sharing with you helps build the confidences of our children, as well as maintain connections, even though we are a diaspora here in the US. So when we launched the program, there were lots of obstacles to overcome. But what we were able to gain within this work was recognition of the power of collaboration across many different platforms. In the first year of the program, they won an award, a $10,000 prize through the Boston Foundation here in our state, that recognized the innovativeness of the program. At the center is the first teacher in the program. Her name is Ms. Priscilla Joseph, and she literally had to build out the curriculum while teaching the curriculum in the first year, in partnership with the supports and the services that we provided at the central office. And she did it with such joy and such passion, because she herself is of Haitian descent, but she felt the importance of making sure that whatever she did and she developed was done in excellence, because of the community that she was serving. In the picture also with her is Dr. Tommy Chang, who was the superintendent of the Boston Public Schools at that time, who took to heart that the community had said yes to the program, and that we were all in agreement that we are moving forward to provide our children the opportunity to celebrate their language and their culture. And to your right, what you can see is that eventually, yes, resources were available. We were able to identify books in partnership with our educators in Haiti, in partnership with publishers in Haiti, to be able to, again, make sure that our students had access to equitable literacy texts that mirrored the quality of instruction that they were receiving in English. And also to ensure that people understood that as a community, our language had as much value as the English language that our students were also learning. In our second year of operation within the program, this is our, at that time, mayor, the mayor of Boston, who came to a naming ceremony. Again, the community standing behind the program, though it was just at that time 2 classes of about 20 kids each. But we had invested our time, our energy, and we had gotten to a point to say that this is it. We are doing this for our community, and we want all of the system to stand behind it. And so at that time, Mayor Marty Walsh came out to honor, as we had advocated that the community change the name of the school or adopt the name of Toussaint Louverture, who is a renowned Haitian hero during the Haitian Revolution. And we named the program and the school after him. So that is now the Haitian Dual Language Program. It's called the Toussaint Louverture Academy. The obstacles that we have to deal with in regards to recognizing Black bilinguals is something that is really rooted in this story of colonialism. And many of our Nigerian friends and folks in Africa may have heard, but for us on the Black diaspora, post-colonialism, who are descendants of the enslaved, we are continuing to battle and struggle through this situation of discrimination and being recognized. What our mother tongue, as I look at, I know you see identified Yoruba as the language that many of her children are, or the students in her community are learning, that could have been the mother tongue of my ancestors. But growing up in Haiti, what we had to deal with is this Creole language that came out of the French, the Spanish, the Taino Indians, who were original inhabitants of the island of Hispaniola, or Haiti Quisqueya in their native language, that we developed, and there's a whole new language. And the language was recognized as an official language not too long ago. And so there are a lot of challenges. How do you teach the Haitian alphabet? Though phonetic, the graphemes of the Haitian alphabet resemble, your basic Roman alphabet, but the question for us is the sound, and how do you teach the children the sounds? And also how there are still disputes and conversations around how do you represent the sound of these particular words. And so one of the biggest things that we had to deal with was an internal struggle as a community. When the community came together and says, we want a program for our students, within the community, there was not unity that said that it was going to be in Haitian Creole. There were members of the community who advocated and said French. That French was much more accessible, had more resources, would be more enticing to those who were not of Haitian descent, who would want to participate in this program, that French was sexier than Haitian Creole. We also, so that internal struggle we had to deal with as a community. And it really brought about questions around identity. How do we identify ourselves? How do we see ourselves? When we look at ourselves as a diaspora, whether we live in Canada, whether we live in Mexico, whether we live in Europe, at different parts of Europe, what is the language that connects us? Are our children, the second generation born outside of Haiti, are they speaking French or are they speaking Haitian Creole? And this really gave us an opportunity to do some deep internal reflections as a people, as a community, and also to deal with some of our own internal concerns. While this system, this school district is awaiting on us on a final say. There was a point in time as we were launching the program where we had aligned everything together and thought that we had resolved the situation of Creole versus French. And we're getting ready to launch the program, where a member of the community wrote a letter to the superintendent and basically said they are not in agreement with the program model, and that they will oppose. And it got to a point where the superintendent almost said no to the program, just because there was not, for them, a perception that there was unity within the community. And so we had to actually go back and advocate and help the community understand the power there is, one, in having a united front, but also being very mindful of, we have to start somewhere. When we're celebrating language and we're celebrating the education of so the education of a generation that is a immigrant in or a diaspora community, you really have to be thoughtful and mindful of, there are doors that open and it only opens once, and that those who are in positions of power may not necessarily be behind you 100% to see your success, and that you have to collectively as a community stand together in order to get your foot in the door. And getting your foot in the door will allow you the additional opportunities, but you cannot close the door before you get your foot into the door. On the left of my presentation, you'll see a quote from Ms. Joseph, and as she shared about the power of her experience within the classroom with the students, and how they were making connections, meaningful connections of what they were learning at home, as well as connecting in the school. As we're telling our story, and to get the program, we had to be the masters of our own story. And to maintain the program and to maintain this work, we continue to have to be the ones who tell our story and tell it in very powerful ways. So till today, we are still organizing amongst ourselves. We organize different events and activities that continue to promote language literacy work. Here we have Ms. Maud Eltilou, who is a renowned children's author for Haitian language. And we had an event with her in February 17th, celebrating International Mother Language Day. But what we're also celebrating was that she did this event kind of for our parents to read to their children in Haitian Creole, so that that we're not just depending on other systems to help us maintain our mother tongue while we are a diaspora, but that it is a community effort. We have to organize with like-minded partners. Boston is full of advocates, nonprofit organizations, advocate groups who are here to align with us to support immigrant communities. And so we partner with them as well as we push forward this work. And the last point I want to be able to share in terms of keeping the story at the forefront is that one of the things as a community we would share with you is never negotiate against your value as a people group. And those who are supporting, as we're teaching children and communities, the power of the English language, what we also want to make sure that they do is that they value their own, that at no point or another is what you're bringing, the assets, the cultural assets that you bring to the table, are they at any point any less than the new thing that you are learning or adopting. English is a powerful language because it gives you access to the world. But even if it's just 4 people that are left in a people group that speaks your native tongue, there is power in that if you're one of those persons, and that you're able to share it with your larger community or additional folks in your community. Some of the challenges that we're still dealing with within the greater Boston area, throughout the news during the winter of 2021, The story of Haitian migrants at the Mexican border was a story that hit very powerfully. And then our community continued to advocate. We support our community leaders through the work that we did to bring about the Haitian Dual Language Program. A lot of our advocates were elevated into different levels of influence, and they've been leveraging that work to be able to ensure that for this new crop or new wave of Haitian migrants into the US, that we are supporting them, that we are ready to receive them, and that we're creating an environment, whether it be in the educational setting, whether it be in other wraparound supports and services that they're in need of, housing, mental health support, that there are resources available for them. One of the particular works that I am doing in the Massachusetts Association of Haitian Parents, we are working with districts to be able to receive these students. These students are coming in from Mexico, and they are going to demonstrate a level of fluency in either Haitian Creole, Spanish, French, or English. And so the teachers that are going to be working with these students need to be ready to receive them at whatever level of fluency that they're coming in from that native language, native tongue, and then be able to teach them English, and so that they can then assimilate themselves into that educational setting. And that is a heavy lift. And so what we're working for together as a community is, how do we create those additional resources for our community, so that, again, is it additional tutoring, after school support, getting our students access to books that are trilingual, that it would have the Creole, the Spanish, and the English in these types of texts for our students, so that, again, they can make connections as they're learning and as they're growing. All right. So as I get ready to wrap up my presentation, I didn't want to go over time. I wanted to share with you this video of a parent whose child is in the Haitian Dual Language Program, and to talk about the power of why Black bilingualism matters, that children, teaching our children, whatever part of the world that they're coming from, that being bilingual or multilingual is a power. We know that there are those within different settings that perceive that learning English as a second language, if you're Black or brown, is a deficit. And that's something that I've experienced personally in my own educational journey, as well as observed that children who are seen as Black or brown learning English is seen as a deficit, but children who are non-Black or brown who are learning another language, it's seen as an asset. And what we want to say is, for all students, all children at any point in their lives, or all adults, being bilingual matters. As a Black bilingual person, as I said, I have 6 languages: French, Haitian Creole, English, because of my own personal love for Korean movies. I started learning Hangul. And then also because of my training and background as in ministry, I've had 6 years of Latin. I still translate Latin for fun. It's something I do that helps me calm myself. Greek and Hebrew are things I had to learn for in School of Theology. I love language. And what I find is that it opens up the door of understanding culture, understanding history. And one of the things we want to make sure in our communities is that for those of us who continue to promote the power of bilingualism, learning different languages, especially for our Black communities, is that it matters for us. It is a power for us. It is an asset for us. It is a value for us. And we have to continue to ensure that all of our children have the opportunity to build up their skill sets, and especially if they're coming from an immigrant community. So to end my portion, I'm just going to share out this video.
Enough about how wonderful this program is. So thank you all very much. All of you guys, thank you for taking such wonderful care of our children. Thank you for filling their brains with knowledge, and especially in particular, bridging the gaps that we might experience as parents. Myself as a first generation American, but a second generation Haitian. Did I get that right? I don't know. But I was born here. Don't speak Creole enough at home, so I was blessed enough to have this experience to help me bridge that connection between our cultures and our languages. Having them have that experience at school was super helpful in supporting me at home to continue. It strengthened me. It gave me more encouragement to continue speaking Haitian Creole with my children on a more regular basis. So merci beaucoup. Tout ça nous fait plaisir.
Wow.
So thank you. And I look forward to your questions towards the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Daphne. 6 languages. Can I describe you as hexalingual or just more? Yeah, that was great. We saw light at the end of the tunnel in Ogun in Nigeria. And I think we are seeing light again at the end of the tunnel in Boston, Massachusetts, in the USA. So before we move on to the final presentation, I will please beg your indulgence to mute your microphone so that when you leave it open, it interferes with the presentation. So thank you very much for your understanding. So completing our presentations is award-winning storyteller and best-selling author, Dr. Ralph Mama. Dr. Mama is the only storyteller in the world today who tells in English, French, Yoruba, and Fon, traditional folk tales from his native Benin and other parts of the world. He is the 2019 winner of Benin National Teachers Association's Award for Outstanding Storytelling and Service to TESOL. Dr. Mama, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Well, I want to congratulate my 2 sisters, Olu Yemisi and Oladejoa and Daphne Germain for wonderful presentation, very inspirational. I want to thank Mary Romney for making it possible for me to be a part of this wonderful experience. I want to thank Mason, Mrs. Mason, Juliette Mason, and Michelle Kim, and all the members of the wonderful team that we worked together to put this program together. I want to start this program with with a song of invocation, because in the culture, in the African oral tradition, especially in the Beninese oral tradition, storytelling is a blending of stories and poetry, music and dance. I won't be able to dance for you today, but I will certainly be able to sing and share some poetry with you as I tell my story. So this is a song of invocation. It's a song my mother, it's a lullaby my mother used to sing to me. She used to sing it to me when I was little, and in my mature years, she went on singing it to me. She sang it to me just the day before she died in 2020. So I want to open this presentation with a song of invocation, which is a Yoruba song. Alalabiyo, ayin so boju loyo, adike adeyo, ayin se boju loyo, asheshe le oshu, oshu abara ting ting, asheshe le oshu, oshu abara ting ting. Alabakeyo, ayin se boju loyo. Alajokeyo, ayin se boju loyo. Ajoke adeyo, ayin se boju loyo. Asheshe le oshu, oshu abara ting ting. Asheshe le oshu, oshu abara ting ting. Alabiyo, ayin se boju loyo. Alajokeyo, ayin se boju loyo. Alabakeyo, Ayin Sobushu Loyo, Alajikeyo, Ayin Sebushu Loyo. If I say story time, you say story time. This is the poem I want to open this presentation with. It's a poem entitled Underneath, We All the Same, written by Amy Maddox. And she was 16 years old when she wrote it. So you can say after me, if you can, if you will, underneath we all the same. He prayed, but it was not my religion. He spoke, it was not my language. He ate, it was not what I ate. He dressed, it was not what I wore. He took my hand, but it was not the color of mine. But when he laughed, it was how I laughed. And when he cried, it was how I cried. My story takes flight over countries and kingdoms of long ago. And it lights on a hunter in a land that had fallen upon hard times. For years and years, not a drop of rain fell from heaven. And the green grass and the leaves upon the trees all withered and died. And the lakes and the rivers all dried up and turned into dust bowls. And there was no food in the land. What was more, the hunter lived with his parents. You see, when the hunter was little, his father and his mother covered him with love and affection. They kept a roof over his head, clothes upon his back. They provided him with all the things that children may need. And now they had entered upon the season of old age. He had to take care of them and provide them with all the things that elderly people need. Keep a roof over their heads, clothes upon their back, keep them well fed. But there was no food in the land. Of course, the hunter was married to a beautiful woman, and he would speak to her in poetry. I will liken you to a night without stars, were it not for your eyes. I will liken you to a sleep without dreams, were it not for your song. He loved his wife. He had to provide for her, take care of her, feed her. But there was no food in the land. One day, out of sheer desperation, the hunter decided to go forth to the sacred forest. It's a forest where no one was allowed to go, for only spirits and ghosts live there. And no sooner had he got to the sacred forest than an antelope came trotting by. The hunter drew his bow and arrow and was going to let loose when something extraordinary happened. The antelope spoke and said, "Please don't kill me, but if you shall suffer all the days of your life. But if you spare my life, I shall give you a wish. But as you can see, sir, I am giving you a choice between a curse and a blessing. Which one are you going to choose now, sir?" Oh, which one do you think the hunter was going to choose? And the hunter said, "A blessing, of course, wonderful, magical antelope. But could you please grant me 1,000 wishes?" No, don't talk to me like that. Don't ever talk to me like that, okay? Only one wish that I grant you. But if you need time to think this over, You may go home now and come back tomorrow at this hour. And I shall be here waiting and waiting and waiting. But remember, sir, opportunities such as this one comes but once. So do not miss it, sir. And the hunter said, I shall not miss it, God willing. And he went back home. Now, as you can see, the hunter was in a quandary. He had a problem. How would he come up with a wish that will stand for 1,000 wishes? And he thought and thought and thought and thought, and he thought and thought and thought and thought, but nothing occurred to him. And just as soon as he got back home, he went straight to his father and said, Father, would you believe what happened to me today in the sacred forest? There, I saw an antelope. I was going to kill it. But the antelope spoke to me and said, please don't kill me. Or if you do, shall suffer all the days of your life. But if you spare my life, I shall grant you a wish. So, Father, what do you suggest? What will your advice be? And his father said, my beloved son, all these years, our land has fallen on hard times, and we're all hungry, and we're getting hungrier and hungrier. Will you please ask the Spirit to give us gold that we may sell for food? And the hunter said, that is a wonderful idea. Then the hunter went to his mother and said, Mom, will you believe what happened to me today in the sacred forest? There I came upon an antelope. I was going to kill the antelope, but the antelope spoke to me and said, please don't kill me. For if you do, you shall suffer all the days of your life. But if you spare my life, I shall grant you a wish. So tell me, Mom, what would you like me to ask for? And his mom said, my beloved son, all these years I have been blind. Will you ask the Spirit to make me see again? And the hunter said, that is a very wonderful idea. Then he went to his wife and said, my beloved, I will liken you to a night without stars, but it's not for your eyes. I will liken you to a sleep without dreams, but it's not for your song. Will you believe what happened to me today in the sacred forest? Then I came upon an antelope. I was going to kill the antelope, but the antelope spoke to me and said, please don't kill me, or if you do, you shall suffer all the days of your life. But if you save my life, I shall grant you a wish. Tell me, my beloved, how would you like me to pass for? And his wife replied, Lord of my affections, all these years we have been praying and hoping and praying and hoping for children. Will you please ask the Spirit for children? And the hunter said, that's the most wonderful idea of all. But the hunter, as you can see, is in trouble. How was he going to choose among those three wishes? His father had one wish, his mother had another, and his wife yet another. And he thought and thought and thought, and he thought and thought and thought, but nothing occurred to him. He went to bed early that night, and all night long, he tossed and turned, and tossed and turned, and tossed and turned, and turned, all night long, yet nothing occurred to him. But as the sun rose in the east in majestic splendor, the hunter rose up and went off to the sacred forest. And there was the antelope, waiting and waiting and waiting. Welcome back, sir. Have a wish from now, sir. As a matter of fact, I have a wish for you now, wonderful, magical antelope. Can you guess what the hunter's wish was? Well, let me tell you. Here is my wish, said the hunter, and may it come true. May my mother see my children in cradles of gold. and his wish was granted, and joy and peace and happiness returned to his home and to all of the homes in his community and to all of the homes in the land. Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam and the deer and the antelope play, and where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the sky is not cloudy all day. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the antelope play, and where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the sky is not cloudy all day. And that was the story. And as you can see, the story is, my storytelling is a blending of stories and poetry, music, and dance. Now, storytelling is a very powerful multicultural teaching tool, especially for TESOL. You see, when you bring a story into the classroom and you tell it interactively, you tell it expressively, the students really rejoice to be a part of the experience. And when you tell the story, it may remind them of a similar story in their own culture. And that creates another connection, you see. And when there's this sense of connection, that really facilitates the learning process. So storytelling and stories are very, very powerful multicultural teaching tool. Now, stories are relatively simple, with simple words, simple language, lyrical most of the time. So that's it's an ideal tool for teaching learners of English as a second language or whatever language it is, the basic skills, vocabulary, grammar, and all the rest. So when you take a story, for example, I take the image of the leaves and the grass, the green grass withering. You could focus the learner's attention on specific words, and help them build the vocabulary up. You can take a very tiny segment of the story and teach them about sentence structure. You can teach them about vocabulary. There's the poem in there, a couple of lines of poetry from Langston Hughes. I would liken you to a night without stars, but it's not for your eyes. You can teach them about rhyming. You can teach them about poetry. You can teach them about music. There's so many things you can teach them about. The more important, however, you teach them about the morals of the stories. You see, the primary function of storytelling is moral instruction. So you give them a sense of morals. You teach them about virtues. Because in this global village that our world has turned into, we need to develop our interpersonal skills. How do we make life agreeable, pleasant, a little better for each other? And stories can help us achieve that. As I said before, you may, when you bring the story to you bring a particular story to the classroom. The learners can be maybe reminded of a particular story from their own culture, and you can ask them to tell the story as simply as they can. And again, that empowers them. This Jermaine Daphne was talking about the empowering people to speak their own mother tongue. That is part of the process. You see, if you allow them, if you let them know that the variant of the story they have heard, their own variant, the variant from their culture, is just as valid as the one you have just shared with them. That really gives them a sense of empowerment. And of course, when you tell a story, when you bring people together like that, when they listen to the stories, they realize how much they have in common. When you can get people to laugh together, sometimes cry together, and think together, and talk to each other. You see, you are really, really building a very powerful learning community in the classroom. So storytelling is a very powerful multicultural teaching tool. I travel the world really. I'm a so-called senior English language specialist for the State Department, and I've been to Guatemala, Costa Rica, Cuba. I've been to Benin. They paid for me to go to my own country. I've been to France, and so on and so forth. And so storytelling is a wonderful thing. And wherever I go, the students, they like it, and they like the idea of being able to tell their own stories. And when we work on stories, I teach them about simplicity of diction, clarity of expression, fluency of delivery. So you're not just teaching them language skills, but you're also teaching about communication skills. You're teaching about you give them basic notions in acting, for example, and so on and so forth. So storytelling is my favorite really teaching tool. I use it as a professor of English. I use it here at Eastern, and when I'm invited to give workshops and storytelling presentations on a very regular basis. So what else can I say? What can I say in conclusion? Well, the Miss Daphne Jermaine was talking about multilingualism, multilingual education. That's very important. That's central to storytelling. When I go to Benin, for example, some people ask me, how is it possible for you who are from Benin to be teaching English to Americans? And I tell them I did so not by neglecting my own mother tongues and culture, but by embracing them. In order to be able to fully embrace somebody else's culture, you have to embrace your own in the first place. That's why I speak Fon very well. I speak it fluently. I speak Nago, which is a variety of Yoruba. Speak it fluently. I use proverbs. I speak French as best I can. As a matter of fact, my first book, my first literature book in French, was the winner of the Grand Prix Littéraire du Bénin last year. So languages are very important, and we had to convey to our students that their mother tongues are just as important as the language they're learning. And that even as they try to embrace the target language, they must also make sure they really stay grounded in their own cultures, in their own languages. And I do believe that through storytelling, we really can quicken each other's awareness of what really binds us, of the membership of the human family. And stories and storytelling reminds us that we're here for a brief period of time, and that our calling really is to leave this world a little better than we have found it. And when you listen to a story, you have to listen with your inner ear, you see? Because if you strike the if you take the word heart and you strike off the H and the T, you have an inner ear. We had to listen to our stories, to each other's stories with our inner ear. For only then shall we hear the roar on the other side of silence. When we hear stories, when we listen to stories, we realize that indeed underneath we are the same. Thank you again, and I look forward to the Q&A session. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mama. That was great. You remind me of my childhood back in Nigeria. As a little boy, we'll sit under the moonlight, and one big auntie or uncle of will tell us stories.
Yes,
you know, and every story had a moral lesson. That was the takeaway. Every story had a moral lesson. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
So we look forward to the interaction that will come after this. And before we go into Q&A, I would like to introduce our executive director. Some of you know Rosa Aronson. We have a new executive director in TESOL, and that is Amber Kelleher. Amber, can you give us a wave, please? Thank you.
Thank you, Akun. Wonderful, wonderful presentations today. Thank you all very much.
Yeah. So some of you will be seeing Amber in person at Pittsburgh when we meet in 3 weeks. And then we'll have a hybrid convention. So if you cannot be there physically, please join us virtually. And I look forward to seeing you all there. So for the next 30 minutes, yes, we have 30 minutes. The floor is open for questions for our panelists. I was going through the chat box and I have a few that I called from the chat box, some comments. So you can use the reaction button. You can raise your hand and I will unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and ask your questions. But to begin with, to the first presenter, when Yemisi was presenting, she said she could not say the reasons for poor funding of schools in Nigeria, that she's not allowed to say. I'm going to say it. It's corruption, misplaced priorities. That's what it is, poor leadership. That is why the schools are poorly funded in Nigeria. She couldn't say it because she's a civil servant there. I can say it. Okay, so Yemisi, your first question is English a second language in Nigeria? When and where do students practice the English language?
Could you please repeat the question? Could you please repeat the question?
Is English a second language in Nigeria?
Okay.
When and where do students practice the English language? I know you said a lot about students going home and speaking Yoruba at home and not having the opportunity to. I'm sure there's still 1 or 2 avenues they can still use the English language. So that's the question.
Yes. Right. You recall that when I was talking, I said my case is peculiar because I teach children in low-income secondary schools. Really, Nigerian students speak English, especially those that attend private schools. But for those that attend public schools in low-income communities, I would say that they get to listen or speak English if they come in contact with other speakers of English. And then Once in a while, they watch American movies, they watch Western movies. But to be honest with you, the category of students I teach in this part of Nigeria are children who watch Yoruba movies. So my own case is peculiar. I'm repeating that my daughter speaks English. And I can see that other students in private schools and some standard secondary schools speak English outside the classroom. But majority of the students in my present school, you can carry out a background check. Majority of the students in my present school don't speak English outside the classroom. They just don't have access to it.
Okay, we'll come back to you with more questions. Let me move on to Daphne now. Hi, Daphne.
Yes.
Does the church offer English classes to the community? How and where?
Yes, English as a second language is provided through our community in the various platforms. Boston is a very privileged and blessed community. So through our city, we have a Office of Immigrant Services that partners with area nonprofit organizations, and they offer ESOL classes to our parents. When I led the Office of English Learners, within the Office of English Learners, for the parents of our children, we provide classes as well. We have a program called Technology Goes Home. And through Technology Goes Home, we use that as a basis to provide English language instruction for our parents by acclimating them and getting them familiar with the technology and how to support their children to do homework. So using that, the language of education to teach them English. There are other partners also throughout the city. We have a lot of universities here who host international students. So they have a lot of different types of programs. Some of them are paid. The city funds a lot of programs, and also through our state, they have a department also that funds programs across the state of Massachusetts. So any immigrant parent or any immigrant who is looking for English as a second language outside of a K-12 setting, they have the access to either free courses, stipend courses that are partially funded, or if they want to pay outright at cost for those courses.
Thank you. Ralph, the next one is for you. I know you mentioned in your presentation that your people say you teach, how do you teach English to Americans? They wonder how an African can teach English to Americans. It's a great question, because in my village, my literate relatives think I'm very intelligent, and I teach English to white people. I teach them their language, so they think I'm very intelligent, you know? So here, the question is, which of your stories do you think will appeal to American students, and why?
No, I mean, the story is in the telling as well. I teach a storytelling class, and we read stories across, cultures. We stories from the Black American tradition, the European tradition, the 1001 Arabian Nights. We read stories from folktales from Africa, and so on and so forth. Various people would, have the preference for various stories, right? But if you take the story and you tell it as it should be told, well, there's always something in it for everybody, you see? And the way you tell it, using facial expressions, gestures, voice modulation, and so on, movements, well, you bring the story alive, and you really bring everybody into the magic circle of storytelling. So it's like asking me, oh, which is your favorite story? I mean, can you ask a father or a mother who his or her favorite child is? Well, every story is my child, sort of. So I love all of them. And when I tell them, I pour my heart and soul into them, and that makes all the difference.
Thank you. Yeah. Let me see. Somebody, Fred Pospisil was asking, how does your school director support you in your struggles?
That's a bit tricky question because, well, I would say that when I started looking for consolidations and reinforcements, my principal actually approved of what I was doing. But then the only support that I could say that the authority of the school and the government of the states, there are things I'm not supposed to say. I'm really grateful that you can relate. You can relate. Yes, I would say that they've been offering me moral support, really. Moral support in the sense that they know that Yemisi is a go-getter. Yemisi will go all out and find a solution to the challenge. So they just keep on cheering me on. Go girl, you can do it. Go girl, we got you. And that's all. That's all. Yeah, let me quickly say this. When I was transferred to this present school last year, April, I recall that the education officer for my zone called me and she told me to my face that she intentionally picked me and sent me to that school because she believed that I would be able to revamp the teaching of English language in the school. And I was like, wow, what gave you the impression that I could do that? She said, you are an award winner and we know what you're capable of doing. I tried telling her that the resources are not available. There is a limit to what I can achieve on my own if the resources are not there. She kept on saying, you are a go-getter, you can do it. Come on, go there and do it. And God supported me by sending education testing service. So I did it. So I get moral support.
Great. Thank you, Yemisi. Can you maybe say in a few words how you can get extra help? I know you're getting help from ETC, ETS, and LC, but how can we help you?
Wow,
if you come with a goal in hand and say, please, I want help, what will you ask for? What would you be asking for?
Really, if I would ask for anything, it would be more fund, because as it is, the support I get from ETS now has provided the resources that I need. But to be honest with you, we don't even have a decent place to keep these things. Now, these resources came this week, and as I speak to you, they are still in the principal's office because the school can't afford to renovate one of the dilapidated classrooms. The intention was that since ETS is supporting us with resources, the school could renovate one of the classrooms. That was my principal's intention. But he looked at the school first and the fund is just not there. So he called me on Friday. Yes, that was yesterday. He called me and said, we will need to keep these things here. And next week, we will see whether we can have a meeting with the parents. Probably we can raise some money with which we can mend the leaking roofs. You can imagine the situation. The classroom we hope to use has leaking roofs, there is no window, and a lot of things are wrong. My principal was saying that if we could get some money from the parents, we would just mend the leaking roofs and put these things there. So as it is, we need money to make that room decent enough to house our computers and projectors. And then, as I speak to you, I have the intention of teaching because I'm going to do this research with 80 students. But as I speak, we have no lockers, no chairs, no tables, nothing available. So
I can relate to that, Yemisi. I can relate to that very well,
can relate.
being a Nigerian. Yeah.
I'm glad you can relate. So on Friday, my principal was saying that if you are able to mend the leaking roof, we could just take some of the lockers in the classrooms, in the regular classrooms, just ask some students to vacate their classroom, because in the regular classroom, where we have more than 100 students, over 50 students do not have places to sit. Some will sit on the windows, some will sit on the floor. The situation is terrible. So my principal was still saying that we will have to recall some of the lockers in the classrooms and take the lockers to the room once they're able to mend the leaking roofs. So as it is, we need money to make that place decent, to renovate the building such that it is decent, and we need money to make lockers, chairs, and tables for the students to use in the
It's quite challenging. It's quite challenging. I understand, but that's just the way things are in our country. But let's see, somebody, Severa Tashpolatova was asking you how he could gain similar access to what you've just secured from ETC. How? But I think in your presentation, you mentioned how. So this was a question while you were giving your presentation.
Okay, about 2 weeks ago, I sent the link to a friend. I might be able to send.
Can you share the link here before we go? We have 15 minutes. Can you share the link here?
I'm not sure I can access it here. I think I have it on my phone. I'm using my computer.
If you can access it in the next 15 minutes, you can maybe,
Yes.
here.
Just go online and type SOFO English Practitioners Grants. 2023 application.
Type it in the chat box. Type it in the chat box. Thank you.
I'm going to do that.
Find the chat box and type it in. Okay, I'm going back to Daphne. Hi, are you there? Okay. The question is now for you to establish the connection, the connection that your degree in education and urban ministry has with the job as the interim assistant in the Office of English Learners. How do you link them?
Very good question. I am a fourth generation pastor. I was ordained as a pastor, and my father, my grandfather, my great-grandfather. And I've always, from a very young age, have worked in the church setting. And my first task, or my first work assignment, was children's education. And so I think around the age of 12, I started running what they call children's church within my community. And so doing education, going through training, learning how to write curriculum in my teen years, and doing PD, professional development for those who are within the church community. And so when I got the opportunity to pursue an additional degree, I wanted to pursue something that would marry both. The urban ministry degree was developed at the Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary with a particular bent that in the greater Boston area, we attract an immigrant community that has over 110 different communities involved, and that they're coming into the US trying to rebuild in aspects of their community. So many of the leaders within those churches and parishes, what they're doing is they're becoming the one-stop shop for their communities. You need marriage counseling, you need advocacy, you need job training. Everyone goes to that leader in their community. So within that degree, you get a lot of training of how to support an immigrant community. And one track was an educational track. So you get trained in all of the pedagogy of that you would get in a regular educational degree. And so I pursued that because I loved teaching. I loved working with young people. I did that for a good 20 plus years within my church setting. I'm very grateful to see that many of the young people that I had the opportunity to speak into their lives. They're now doctors, lawyers, nurses. They've developed teachers, principals. I look young. I look young. I'm not. And so I've seen them grow. And so this degree, also within the educational setting, and actually added a different flavor in terms of my leadership style. One of the things in education is many folks come up the educational track into leadership positions, and they do PDs on how to engage the community, but many of them do not, especially in the community that I serve, they did not grow up in the community, and they did not grow up understanding the various needs that are contextualized in a community, especially immigrant communities. So many of those who served within the Office of English Learners come from privileged backgrounds, born in the US, went to the Harvards, went to the Boston Universities, Boston colleges. So they didn't have the struggle and the necessary grit to understand that if in the system you encounter an obstacle, you need a driver that comes from an internal source that will help you combat and stand against the oppression. The system will tell you there's no money. The system will tell you can't build the program. The system will tell you, well, we tried it last year, it did not work, but we have someone who is a researcher who's done this, and that. We're gonna bring them in, they're gonna do a training. And in the back of your mind, you're like, by the time they've done this project with this researcher, it'll be 2 to 3 years in. That means the children now who are sitting in the classroom now and the family now are not getting those services. And so with my training, my background within the ministry, within urban ministry and education, it really helped me kind of bridge the gap of understanding my why from a religious perspective, that we have to stand against, like MSC is identifying. The work we do now is not just for what's to come, because the children that's in front of me now that needed the program couldn't wait. The things that I advocated for while working in the Boston Public Schools, and if you'll speak with people in the Boston Public Schools, they'd say, yeah, if you get in a room with Daphne, she's a fighter. And I fight because my why is very clear. It is that we are the adults in the room who need to make decisions even when it's uncomfortable for us, and even if it requires a sacrifice, meaning I have to pick up boxes, I have to work an extra 2 to 3 hours beyond my work day to make sure that this thing gets done, because it's going to impact the life of this child now, and I will never be able to get that moment. So that's how I bridge my background, my experiences in ministry with the work that I do. It drives my why on a daily basis.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Very inspiring. So many nice things have been written in the chat box. I hope you presenters are reading the chat box. Nice messages and great stuff that you're doing. Ralph, yes. Another question for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I look at you, I think about comedians, because they have to really entertain. They have to make the audience laugh. So your storytelling is like doing comedy.
Yeah.
If it is not interesting, then you lose. So now the question is, how do you predict that the audience will like such stories? And what feature of your storytelling activity makes you outstanding?
Well, I don't know. I don't know what makes me outstanding, but usually when I'm invited to tell, to give a storytelling presentation,
yeah,
I make a point of getting there, a few, maybe half an hour ahead of time. So I just sit and watch and listen, and that's how, and in watching them and listening to them and watching them interact and listening to what they're saying, I get a sense of what story will be really well suited. Look, you never know. You never know. But with children, because children I'm the most afraid of children, because you can lose them very easily, and they have none of the hang-ups that that we adults drag about. If they don't like the story, they'll tell you right away, and it's easy to lose them. So you had to keep them engaged, you had to keep them focused. And so I when I'm telling stories to very little children, I find a short one, very interactive, with a lot of gestures, with simple words. That's how with children, that's how I pick the story to tell. But with adults, as I said, the story, the way you tell it makes all the difference. The way you tell it. But nowadays, I mean, when you stories about working together, creative thinking, critical thinking, beautiful stories with beautiful poetry and music. I mean, everybody loves a good story. So
Absolutely.
I have no fear when I go storytelling, but if possible, I get ahead of time and I just play detective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, yes. Wow, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Yeah, there was a comment again, more of a comment from Susan Roberts. This is for Yemisi. Susan was suggesting maybe pairing some of your learners with learners in other parts of the world, just to expose them to English-speaking opportunities. So, and with limited internet access, I don't know if the facilities you have now, once you have that classroom working, and you can establish internet connectivity, it's something that you may want to explore. Yemisi, are you there? Hello, Yemisi? Connection problems. Well, this is how it is in Africa. So, hello, Yemisi? Your mic is on. Okay, I'll come back to you. Sorry. In the meantime, there is no raised hand, which means everything is very clear. Like in the classroom, when students don't have questions, it means the lesson was well understood. And there's no further question in the chat box. So is there anybody that would like to say something? I mean, please, we have 5 minutes. Anybody that would like to say something? Attendees, not presenter, attendees. Unmute yourself and speak. Hello? Mary, would you like to say something? Ayana? Catherine is saying something or typing something, yes? And say something on behalf of BellPath.
I just want to say how pleased I am, not only with TESOL's wonderful efforts and the opportunity and the time that they've given us for this webinar today, but also how grateful I am to the presenters, to Daphne, to Oluyemisi, and to Dr. Mama. I am very grateful to all of you. I think that all of you have shown enormous courage and foresight and insight in so many ways. All of you are great inspirations to all of us in your respective contexts all over the world. I want to thank you as well, Okan, not only for your leadership today, but your leadership in the association, which has been exemplary and inspirational, what you've done on the board of directors. I thank you very much for that. The entire association thanks you. And to Amber Kelleher, thank you so much for attending today. Congratulations on your appointment, your recent appointment as our new executive director. We are most fortunate to have you. And I also want to thank Dr. Ayana Cooper and Dr. Keisha Bryan for their leadership and their organization. The three of us sort of collaborated in putting this webinar together. So Dr. Ayana Cooper, who of course is also on the board of directors, and Dr. Keisha Bryan, who has held so many wonderful leadership positions and who was such a great inspiration to all of us. I want to thank them as well. So thank you very much to everybody for attending and for these incredibly inspirational presentations.
Thank you very much, Mary. That was great. Anybody else would like to say something before we close for dinner?
How can I get the coordinates of my co-presenters? I would like to communicate with them. Can somebody send me the email addresses?
Michelle, I don't know. I think we can figure that out, right?
Yeah, I'll send a follow-up email offline.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. All right. Any other questions or? So, well, yeah, okay, Fred, yes, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all the presenters and for you as the host. But I think for me, what was so important about this presentation, particularly in the context of the Black History Month, is just the whole idea of sharing culture and the idea of sharing stories and the idea and the effort that teachers, I mean, I teach TESOL as well, but have to make to incorporate our cultural experiences, but most importantly, to provide those opportunities for others to incorporate theirs into our lessons and into how we can, show respect and to encourage participation from students by making them feel more comfortable that their culture has value and their background has value, and to recognize that in the classroom. So it's a great reminder in this month. And so thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Fred. That was great. So I think this brings us to the end of this event. Hello, Deborah. I can see your face now. Joyce, are you there? Can we see your face, please?
Hi, Okan.
Know you.
Okan, I'm on a train and I've been listening quietly, so I'm going to keep staying up. But thank you from your input, but also just everyone who's participated. And it's so great people could come out on the weekend. But I'm going to turn it off because I've got a lot of background noise.
All right. Okay, no problem. Thank you very much. I think we're seeing faces now. We've seen Shelley here, Shelley Taylor, and incoming president, and we have Deborah, soon to be past president, Catherine Lobo, ex-board member, and it's a pleasure. I'd like to thank Oluyemisi. I mean, in Nigeria, we just say Yemisi. We don't say the whole Oluyemisi. And then Daphne and Ralph for presenting today, and particularly Belfa for putting this together. I mean, it's been a fabulous panel, and I've seen the comments in the chat box. It's been very great. Thank you very much. So we've seen the appreciation, but don't forget in 3 weeks, we are meeting in Pittsburgh in person, TESOL Hybrid Convention. If you can't make it in person, join us virtually. Early bird closes day after tomorrow, so don't wait until March 1st or you pay the higher rates. Thank you very much. All right, so I'll say goodbye to everybody now. Bye.
Bye.
Have a nice evening. Bye.